Hiya Will, thanks for the footage, courtesy of Mark. I hope you don't mind me giving you sort of my thoughts and feelings on where you need to consider making some changes in your golf swing. I'll try and keep this as sort of straightforward as I can. One or two of the items that I sort of cover here would be easier to show you and demonstrate to you in the flesh than obviously through the internet, but at least we can give you some sort of food for thought in relation to the shot pattern that you've got. Looking at this footage, my sort of initial feelings would be that there's a lot of shots won't get right, big pushes, the occasional quick hook, and the occasional sort of, well, the ongoing issue of controlling your low point during the golf swing. Now, if we look at the three images across the top row, this would be my main point of concern. First of all, club face very, very open to the arc coming into the golf ball. One of the main reasons for that is that the left wrist gets a little bit cut at the top. I'd like to see that a little bit flatter. That would also create a little bit less of an across the line position and create a little bit more of a laid off position, if you will. Whenever the shaft is short of parallel, it should appear laid off. So even if it was in line with your hands and short of parallel, it's actually across the line. Whenever the shaft's across the line, that's going to shift the plane line to the right, which added to a very sort of, cut left wrist, club face open just before impact, lends itself to a massive right shot. Now, the hook and the catching the ball heavy come because of, you can see on the top right image there, the head is dropping back, the neck tilts are different to what you see with Grant Waite down on the bottom, and the club is overtaking the hands. Obviously I miss impact on that piece of footage, but you get the feeling that the club is being sort of catapulted past the hands quite quickly. But partly because you're anticipating the big right and you're trying to fend that off, so the feeling would be to try and get rid of it, square the club face up at the last minute, make up for what you're seeing on the far left hand side of the screen. And then sort of the problem with that is if it's not done at the correct rate, it's going left. And it also, excuse me, as you do sort of get the club overtaking the hands fastly, you're widening the radius of the swing, which in turn causes low point issues. So it doesn't really matter how much you try and maintain the flying wedge and keep the handle leading, etc. It's just not possible to do that and play good golf from the position you see on the far left of your screen, because as open as you are coming into impact, if you then lead with the handle, you're going to push that ball so far right every time it's untrue, and obviously as a bit of a player that's not going to get the job done, so you start figuring ways out of getting the ball to come back to the target. So what changes would I make? Well, for me, I'm just going to leave that footage up on the top left because you get the feel for how open the club face is. I think there's a lot of great stuff going on with this swing, to be fair, Will. You're obviously a good player. You've been working on your game hard. I'd certainly like to see this left wrist in a slightly better condition at the top. Now, some players find that difficult to sort of change in the time and space of the backswing. So one of the things that I would suggest you consider doing, certainly the first thing I would have you do if you were to come and see me, would be to put that bowed or slightly flatter left wrist condition in sort of pre-top of the backswing, really. Mark O'Hara, you see here on the bottom left of your screen, he's actually over in the States on a golf scholarship at present, and he came over during the winter months and spent some time working on this, and he's very, very similar to yourself. Obviously a good player, got to the point where he was frustrated with how far right he was hitting everything, couldn't really figure out why. He was very, very cooked at the top, very, very open coming into the ball, as per you are on the top left-hand side of the screen. So what we started to do with Mark was we started to give him the feeling initially of working. I'll just play this back and get his waggle going. The piece that we wanted in was the flatter left wrist early. So what he's trying to do is from set up to waist level, he's trying to feel like the butt of the club works down and under. And that actually creates a little bit more of a bold left wrist. So if you will, if you think about Dustin Johnson or Graham McDowell at the top of the backswing, whilst we don't want you that severe, we certainly want a little bit more of that in there, don't we? We need to be moving towards where they are to flatten out this left wrist. So I'm just going to zoom this one in. What I'd prefer to see is, rather than this relationship between left wrist and forearm, I would prefer to see, I'm just going to do this underneath for you. You've got the forearm line in red, so that's not going to change, but I'd rather see this left wrist just bowing down ever so slightly short term. Not a great deal, but ever so slightly so. And it's much easier to put that in at speed at the start, rather than trying to put that in at speed. Some players do that very successfully in the downswing, where the left wrist sort of palmar flexes or bows during the downswing. If you can do that, great. I think, you know, bearing in mind how open you are coming into impact, I'd rather see you do it straight away. So the feeling for Mark here was that he was going to put that bowing in the left wrist in very, very early. So that would be the feel. That became his waggle. You can see there he's pushing down, bowing the left wrist a couple of times, and then when he comes to hit the shot, it doesn't bow as much, but it doesn't get as cupped as he used to be. So at the top of the backswing now, the Mark was much more cupped than you were. I mean, he could hit it right of the world, and I'm sure they'd agree with me on that. When I emailed you I'm going to email you some more information across, and I'm going to email you some images of Mark when he started and when he'd been working on this feel for a number of weeks, and the difference is just remarkable. And he started to draw the ball on a much more consistent manner, but more importantly, you know, he may have missed left and right, but the big right completely went out of his game. So we need a little bit more Graham McDowell, if you will, putting into that top of the backswing position, and we want to do it early. Once we're in a better position coming or going back, then what you're going to find is there's much less of a need to release the club on the way through. And that's what I see here. I just see a player who's trying to release the club. Easiest way to release the club is to move the head back as you're coming through the golf ball. So what we tend to see with yourself here is this sort of movement. Let's put that on. Back and up through the hip. As the head moves back, the right shoulder moves down more than it's moving around, and that allows us to catapult the club past the hands, as can be seen here, with quite a high exit. So head moving back and up, allowing you to release the club and square the blade, rather than really what we want to see is a much more consistent move from the top, where the head stays stable, the lower body continues to move forward, the hands can be much quieter. You cannot have quiet hands through the hit with the club face very open at, say, 2 feet below delivery. It's just not possible. It's a recipe for hitting it to the right. So I'd be looking initially, Will, at changing the condition of your club face via your left wrist at the top of the backswing. When you do that, you're going to experience some shots to the left initially, because whilst the backswing may look more as you would want it, you're still going to want to make this sort of releasey move through the hit. So initially, I wouldn't worry too much about the quick one to the left. It's just in there because you don't need to release the club anymore. Improving the flying wedge and leading with the handle for a good player is generally speaking all about improving the reason why he loses that flying wedge. I don't think there's a good player alive who thinks the club passes the hands to impact, but unfortunately the club needs to pass the hands through impact if the club is very open. So if you change the condition of the blade via using the back of the left hand as a reference point, so we'll just take this one in the middle back. We want a flatter left wrist at the top. And if that left wrist got a little bit more bowed and the club face got a little bit more shut, I wouldn't have a massive problem with that. I've come across more good players with bowed left wrists than I have with cupped left wrists. It's just much easier to sort of hold the club through impact than it is to try and release the club through impact. So the feeling you would be working on would be this, from setup to waist level. Don't let the arms drift away from you. Work the butt of the club down and under. What I'll do is when I send you the email across, I'll try and dig out the recap that I did for Mark relating to this move, so that you can actually see him demonstrating the whole drill. There may also be one on there for a guy called Dave Brunton as well, but I know Mark's done it definitely. So if you do get a minute between now and when I get the email across to you, to look at Mark O'Hara's recaps. If you go on my channel, just type his name in, you should get about 3 or 4 recaps up. It'd be worth having a look at the early ones, because he was going from a lot of big rights to pretty much banging line draws. So the center image here holds the key. I'm just going to blow this one up for you. Rather than being on the green line, as we can see there at the top, we want the left wrist more on the red line. That's going to lay the club off more, get it squarer to the arc, and eliminate the shots that are going a long way right. Get rid of the big right, you can start to calm down the left and the hitting the ground behind the ball issue that you may be experiencing. So hope this helps. Once you get the email with the information on it and the link to this video, you'll have obviously my email address. Feel free to find me a line with any questions you may have. If you do want to get my mobile number, you can get it via Mark. So if you ever wanted to ring up and have a chat about this, if it was convenient, you could also do that and just discuss various things that may or may not be bothering you. So I hope this helps. I hope it helps you get your game back on track. And if you have any questions, like I said, feel free to get in touch. Good luck, and I look forward to watching things progress.